school, I too was a Tiger, a Middletown High School Tiger. So in a sense, I almost feel like we're cousins, you know? First of all, I am so honored to be here, not just in San Diego, although that too, but really to be with you guys, because you guys are the future, and I want to talk with you, not as a speech, but I really want to just have a conversation with you, tell you a few stories, and I do have to start with an apology for bringing all of this humidity from Washington, D.C. This is not usual for San Diego, and I do truly apologize. So listen, you all know, because you've studied it, this is 9/11. 9/11 in 2001 was a terrible day. A terrible day. And I know that some of you weren't even born then. And most of you, even though born, were probably too young to really understand what was going on. But your parents, and your grandparents, and your aunts, and your uncles understood. And like all of us who were there at the time, we were scared, and we felt vulnerable, and we didn't feel safe. When I was in high school, actually when I was in grammar school, what scared us and what made us feel more vulnerable was the threat of the Russians, the USSR, bombing us with a nuclear weapon. You will never guess what our brilliant leaders told us to do so that we would feel safer and less vulnerable. They told us that all we had to do to protect ourselves from a nuclear bomb was to hide underneath our desks. Really? Do you really believe that by hiding under a desk, you're going to prevent any damage from a nuclear bomb? I don't think so. Moving to today, I know that many kids in communities and urban cities and in San Diego, kids like you, oftentimes feel unsafe and vulnerable and scared. Unfortunately, what too many do to change that is to grab a weapon, to grab a gun, to grab a knife, to fight back in a violent way when confronted with a potentially violent situation. I'm here to tell you that that will make you no safer, no less vulnerable than my hiding under a desk made me safer and less vulnerable from a nuclear bomb. Don't believe it for a minute. Guns are the wrong approach. I want you today, in the few minutes that I have, not just to listen, but really to think. I want you to think about what you can do to make this a better school, a better community, and even, yes, a better nation. I want you to think because you are capable of speaking less harshly, of treating other people the way you want to be treated, of showing resistance to and patience when confronted with a potential situation. And you have the ability to serve as a role model for others. You really do. I come from Washington. I run an organization called the Peace Alliance. We actually even have a Student Peace Alliance as part of the Peace Alliance. And we are a national organization of some 60,000 strong across the country. People like your families, like your parents, like your grandparents, like your uncles, like your aunts, who want to make this a better world. They're just like you. And what we do for them is we educate them. We show them the benefits of alternative means to the more punitive, the more militaristic, the more incarcerating policies that take place today, all too often. And then once we get them educated and trained and empowered, we then mobilize them. And we bring them together and we give them actions that they can take that can make a difference. And some of those actions involve advocacy, and we send them up to Congress, and we send them to community leaders, and we urge them and arm them with the understanding of the benefits of peace building to make sure that these policymakers will understand sufficiently in order to change some of the ways we do things in this country. All right, let's get real here. If I were in your position, and I was at one point, I'd be sitting there and thinking, what the heck does this old white guy have to say that could possibly be relevant to anything in my life or in my community? And you want to know? It's a very reasonable question. So let me share with you a little insight that maybe will help. Many of you may recall, not quite 3 years ago, a small town in Connecticut, Newtown, at an elementary school, Sandy Hook Elementary School. On a Friday afternoon, a deranged 20-year-old kid, came into the school with guns blazing, shot and murdered 20 young kids. First and second graders, kids like your younger sisters and brothers or cousins. And then he proceeded to go and shoot and murder 6 teachers and educators. I got up the next morning, Saturday morning, and went to my computer and started just writing down my random thoughts. And I said in that piece, Newtown has had a great and profound effect on me personally. I told them that I had been born and brought up in Connecticut, that I knew Newtown well. I had friends in Newtown. I had been a public school teacher. But then I told them something that, frankly, I had rarely mentioned, certainly not in public, to very many people. I told them that 17 years before Newtown, my 24-year-old daughter, Leah, was brutally murdered in a case that still remains unsolved today. And she left behind 2 small children, 5-year-old Ryan and 3-year-old Abby. And I had to be the one to explain to them that their mom was never coming back. I felt pain that day, and right after Newtown, I felt pain for the Newtown families who had lost their sons and daughters, and in some instances, their mothers. And I know that some of you, many of you, hopefully not, but some of you have experienced the loss of somebody you love, sometimes in a very violent sort of way. And I know that you were pained by that. Look, nobody can tell anybody else how they should feel, or how they do feel, or what'll happen later, unless you've experienced something like that. I have experienced something like that, and I do feel the pain. I may not understand individually all of the pain that some of you may be experiencing, but I understand the concept of it because I have been through it myself. But it keeps me going. It has inspired me. I have taken that pain and I have devoted my life to working for peace, to make sure that nobody else has to go through what I had to go through. And I instilled that in those 2 little kids, one of whom, Ryan, has graduated college and works in a good job in Chicago. And his sister, Abby, who now is a junior in college. They knew that there was only one direction to move in, and that was forward.
That's right.
You can't let these things consume your life and help you and put you in anger and misery and bitterness. You must move forward, and hopefully you'll move forward by being role models for alternative ways to deal with violence. You know, right after Newtown happened, Vice President Biden was appointed by the President Obama, to run a task force on reducing gun violence in this country. And on the eve that his task force was going to release the findings and recommendations of their force's work, he held a press conference. We do that a lot in Washington. And at that press conference, some smart aleck, some people would describe it a little bit differently, but some smart aleck reporter asked the vice president, you know, Vice President, why are you even bothering to issue your recommendations in your report? Don't you know that the National Rifle Association has already done their duty and gone and convinced enough congressmen that nothing is going to happen, no changes are going to be made? Unfortunately, that reporter was right in his prediction, but he was wrong in his attitude. And the vice president looked out at him, and he said to this guy, he said, listen, just because you can't do everything doesn't mean you shouldn't do something. And each of us can do something. Individually, we can do something. And when we individually do something, collectively, we can eventually do everything. You can do something, and I urge you to do something. You know, the Peace Alliance works in a variety of areas. I told you that we educate, we mobilize, we advocate. But we work in a variety of areas that are key to building a better world. We are working to empower community peace building, like what's being done in San Diego. We are working to humanize the justice system, because if there's anybody that thinks the justice system isn't broken, I got a message for you. We are working to teach peace in schools and to start at a young age to give you the tools and the means to be able to carry through the rest of your life. And if we started teaching peace in schools in a meaningful way in a sufficient number of schools, and we started in kindergarten, call me back in 12 years, because I'm going to show you how the country has changed. One last story. I know some of you have studied this wonderful congressman by the name of John Lewis from the state of Georgia. John Lewis is an amazing person, a voice for peace building, a voice for nonviolence. In 1965, when he was just 23 years old, he was very much involved in the civil rights movement. And on a Sunday afternoon in Selma, Alabama, he was leading a march to gain voting rights for African Americans, because in the South, they were being denied it. And you want to know, unfortunately, to this day, minorities are still being denied the right to vote in an unencumbered way, and that is wrong. But in 1965, he was leading this march. And he was at the head of the march group, and they came to the Edmund Pettus Bridge, where they were confronted with a large group of state troopers who proceeded to charge the marchers and to beat them. And there is a picture that you can get on the internet, and it's of John Lewis on his knees being beaten with a nightstick, and he had his hands in his pocket. Recently, in March of this year, on the 60th anniversary of that terrible Sunday, he was on The Daily Show with Jon Stewart. Some of you may even have stayed up late enough to watch the Jon Stewart show. But Jon Stewart asked him about that picture. And he said, you know, Congressman Lewis, how is it that while being beaten, and that beating resulted in a fractured skull that sent him to the hospital and almost killed him? But he said to him, how could you possibly have been there being beaten on your knees with your hands in your pocket? And Lewis said, I and the marchers were absolutely committed to the message of Martin Luther King and the message of nonviolence. And we knew that if we fought back, it would be used against us to say, oh, all of these rabble-rousers were down here. We knew we were on the right side of the issue, and we were not going to give them the satisfaction. We know that the way to deal with violence is not by more violence. He had a better way, and there is a better way, and you can find a better way. I'm going to close with just one last little note. Recently, has anybody heard of somebody by the name of Oprah Winfrey?
Oh, yeah.
Anybody?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the Peace Alliance has recently been working with Oprah Winfrey and her people about a 7-part documentary that's going to air on her network. I think it's going to be live streamed for those of you that perhaps can pick it up through your cell phones and computers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's a 7-night documentary on belief and values and cultural cooperation and faith. And it's something that she's been working on for 3 years. And it's really just personal stories of people who have overcome adversity and confrontation and violence to come together based on their values and their beliefs and their faith. I had the opportunity to talk with her and told her that the Peace Alliance is not a faith-based operation, which many of the other groups that are helping her promote this documentary are. I told her, though, that peace building is a value, is a belief, is a means to creating cultural cooperation, does rely upon faith. And she agreed, and that's why I'm urging you, if you have the opportunity, either through her network or through your live streaming, to watch that, because you will see segments on things like forgiveness and cooperation between Israelis and Palestinians who never seem to be able to get along, and other opportunities in different countries from around the world and in our country that have overcome these adversities and have played a role in showing the way to nonviolence. I urge you to look at that, but I urge you more importantly to learn how to speak less harshly, to treat other people the way you want to be treated, to show restraint in tough situations, and to be role models, because you are the leaders of this country in this world in the future. It's a heavy burden perhaps, but it's also an opportunity, and I know you are capable of doing it. Thank you very much.